Vida knew that Votes for Women was not a popular periodical. Supporting English women in their struggle to gain the vote, the right their Australian sisters already had, provoked hostility in staid Melbourne. In letters to the editor of The Age and The Argus, citizens asserted that women had no business smashing windows or otherwise destroying property simply because they claimed this right. They believed the suffragettes should follow the example of Australian women. Wait until men granted them the suffrage. From her own experience, Vida knew how effective that was likely to be, and so she had resolved to do what she could to draw attention to their plight. Even some of her colleagues did not quite understand why she was so vehemently in support of the English suffrage. But for years, Vida had devoted herself to the cause of social justice wherever she thought a fight was necessary. The other newspaper she held out for sale, The Woman Voter, was her own project. She was its publisher, owner and chief editor, and she had set it up to show Australian women what a weapon their newly granted vote could be if they worked together for the common good. The monthly paper was not simply polemic, not just parochial in scope. Vida published stories and articles by women from the USA and Britain, interviewed prominent women in many fields, and provided reports on women's status from all over the world. Crisply written, free of the cooking and fashion hints characteristic of other publications for women, The Voter was the forerunner of New York's Ms. magazine that appeared 50 years later at the height of second-wave feminism. In the 2 hours before dusk, people streamed past Vida on her corner, some amazed, some amused, a few openly contemptuous. She was laughed at, glared at. One or two passers-by smiled and nodded encouragingly, but nobody bought either paper. Then came a woman, heavily laden with parcels, who stopped in front of her. "Will you buy our non-party woman's paper, price 1 penny?" asked Vida. The woman smiled, set down her parcels on the pavement, dived for her purse and handed the coin over in exchange for a copy of The Woman Voter. "My first buyer," wrote Vida later. "I felt inches taller." But the woman was almost the only buyer that day, and one of only a handful for the next few days. Then Vida hit upon a bold idea. In Chapel Street, Prahran, she pinned a poster to her skirt that read, "Votes for Women Torture by order of the Home Secretary." This stark description of what was being done to the suffragettes in England caused a sensation, and all her copies of both newspapers sold out immediately. Vida's photograph appeared in the local press. It remains the most famous photograph of her, and there were no more sneering remarks, no more supercilious glances from passers-by. Within a couple of weeks, following her example, 8 women were selling her papers on the streets of Melbourne. How did Vida Goldstein, a woman in her 40s, the child of an impoverished immigrant father and a mother whose family was blighted by tragedy, develop the kind of courage that enabled her to do this? Vida was born 30 years before Federation. She died 4 years after the end of World War II. She came to adulthood when Australia was in the throes of inventing itself as a united nation, where ways of doing things, good and bad, existed to be tried, adopted or rejected. She was and remained vitally interested in social justice issues for women and children everywhere. She was an incisive and shrewd commentator on international politics, and her writings on any subject are logical, clear, sometimes humorous, and always full of energy. She was also a forceful and persuasive orator, with a natural authority that enabled her to be heard at a time when microphones did not exist. It's a lasting regret of mine that her voice, always described as low and well modulated, was never recorded for posterity. It's not as if Vida herself has been entirely neglected. She is at least briefly mentioned in almost every history of women in Australia. All the same, her name is not particularly well known outside scholarly circles. The question then becomes, given the kind of